Hello, friends. Welcome back to another edition of the Lovecast with Jamal podcast. We have our favorite guest on the show, back on the show, Aly Sousa, who is here. She's coming to us all. Actually, tell us where in the world you are right now, Aly.
I'm in the Azores. So the Azores are a group of 9 islands off the coast of Portugal, about 800 miles. And
Amazing.
We're in the southernmost of the 9 islands. It's a little bitty island. It's only 6 miles by 10 miles big. And we come here pretty much most summers. It's wonderful.
Santa Maria, right?
Santa Maria, yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And that's right literally in the middle of it's interesting because it's in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, but it's Europe. It's considered Europe. It's part of it's Portuguese, but it's like literally in the middle of the ocean.
Yeah, literally. I think the next closest group of islands are the Canary Islands. And still, it's, even though they're owned by Portugal, these islands, we're still 2-hour flight from Portugal. So it really is in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. They call the Azores the Hawaiian Islands of Europe.
Amazing. And I've had the privilege of, visiting you guys there and staying with you guys. And it is a magical place. It really is beautiful.
What year was it? 2016 or 17?
I'm thinking it was 17 because it was right on the tail end of the Camino. So it was after the Camino.
Okay. And you did that year.
2017. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I thought it was the same year I went to South Africa too. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Lots can happen in how many years is that? 17,
6
18,
years.
19, 20. Yeah, 20. My gosh, 6 years. Wow.
I know. And a lot has happened.
Yeah, for sure. And we're looking to get back there.
The world's changed.
Oh, it has many times over.
Yeah.
But you're there. You've been there for 2 months now, right? This is your second month, right?
Actually, we just passed the 1 month mark. We arrived on June 30th.
Okay.
So today is what, August? I lose track of time here. August 3rd, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. Okay. So just over a month.
Just over a month. So we won't be back for another 6 to 7 weeks in the States. We're blessed.
Amazing.
We're very blessed to be able to be here for that amount of time.
Absolutely. Well, I think I asked you this last time because last time you were on the podcast, you just got back from Hawaii, and I asked you what your takeaway from Hawaii was. But what's your takeaway after a little over a month in the Azores? What are you realizing?
It's a very different summer so far for me than last summer. Last summer, I feel like I kind of had entered into a dark night of the soul. I've gone through this a few times, but I really had felt like it might be a summer like that leading in, even though we had such a glorious time in so many ways. I really was delving into some deep, deep layered stuff inside of my soul. And this year, it feels like almost like a rebirth in some ways.
Interesting.
Yeah, it has been a very interesting. There's lots and lots of family members here that I haven't seen in anywhere from maybe 5 years to 21 years. So it's been a lot of kind of reconnecting. Just an example, we do a girls' night out in the restaurant down in the village where we live, right off the ocean. And we've been doing it for several years. I would say maybe 4, 5, 6 years now. And we started off with maybe 5 people, 5 women. We had 31 women. 31 women.
Love it.
It was like a flooding of women, of the feminine. It was so beautiful. And just all the exchanges going on. And it feels very light this year in general. I'm feeling more light. Yeah. It's been good.
Amazing. Awesome. I love that. So good. So good. And you have your glorious twin brother who's been there with you.
And it's his first time. He and his wife are here with us. And everybody just loves him. He's a force to be reckoned with. And he's funny and offbeat. And they love it. They love it here.
So
they just fit right on in with everybody.
Yeah. So cool. Well, I love it that we can have this conversation all the way being here in California and you're over there in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. It's incredible that we can have this conversation through
I
technology.
know. I
Super
love
cool.
it. And it's so clear. It took me a bit to get the new Zoom link and all that. I'm so glad it feels clear. My earphones are working well. Thank God.
Good. Yeah, totally. Well, we're as if you've been listening to this podcast and you know that Aly and I have been slowly going through a series of conversations about things that really drain us of our life force energy. And we all have this, we've talked about this before, but everybody has I like to say this, with our physical presence on the earth, we have a physical body, as everybody is aware of. We have a mental body, which is part of our mindset, but then we also have an energy body. And this energy body, we don't spend a lot of time here, especially here in the West, focused on it, or we don't really talk a lot about it, or really even understand it. But everybody has an energy system, an energy, and it's not just like, hey, I'm not talking about metabolic energy, like, hey, I had a meal and you have a blood sugar spike, or I'm not talking about that. Or hey, I got some sleep and I feel
Mhm.
energized because I slept well. I'm talking about, some people would call it soul energy, but it's really your life. In the East, they call it chi or prana.
Prana.
But it's this idea, it's this life force energy. And believe it or not, there are things that drain us of our life force energy that are not quote unquote physical in nature, even though the physical does have an effect on it for sure.
Mhm.
But there are things that drain us of our energy. And we're in this series talking about the things that drain us of our life force energy. So, really excited. Aly, tell us,
Yes.
kind of introduce us to, we're going to talk about a couple things today that are really major drains on life force energy. Can you tell us
Yes.
about that?
Yes. So, and they're kind of linked in certain
Mhm.
ways together. So we're going to talk about a couple of them. One of them is losing contact with our natural presence, the now moment, through our thoughts, through fantasy, and through reverie.
Mhm.
So it's this idea of when we're habitually in our minds, and we're imagining, just things. We're kind of fantasizing about things, being lost in a yogic term is called vikalpa, which is basically this idea of fantasy, reverie, mental images, and illusions.
Mm,
It's a primary way that we actually end up divorcing ourselves, and also in remaining indifferent from sweet, simple, abiding in our own natural states of being.
mm,
So, the other one that we want to kind of unpack today is kind of closely related to it. Um, and that is just being clingy or adhering too firmly to our strongly held beliefs and opinions, which can be real easy to
yes.
do.
Oh yeah.
Which
Totally.
can, and with that, it's kind of it's closely related to what I kind of just expressed. It can be hard to believe that this energy and an energy like this until you experience it for yourself. um, but it's this idea of just holding too strongly to held beliefs and opinions. um, Kind of wishful thinking. It can be rooted in wishful thinking, fearful thinking, and it's very often repetitive thinking. We don't realize how much our thinking is repetitive,
Yeah. Cyclical.
yet very cyclical. um, and just this idea that, you know to think that, we have a total worldview
Mm,
of a thing rather than a small perspective of it. You know what I'm
mm,
saying?
mm-hmm,
um,
mm-hmm.
So it's both of these, I think, can be very draining of our life force energy, both of those. And we want to kind of unpack this today.
For sure. You know, Interesting you say that. The most tired people I know that are always tired, they always talk about, I'm so tired, so tired. Typically, and I don't mean this from a physical standpoint, a physical ailment. I mean, they're just tired. They just get worn down a lot. Are the people that have, like, if you could look at their vocabulary,
Yeah.
I was just observe this. They're part, a word that comes up a lot is should. This shouldn't
Yes.
be this way.
Yes.
Or
Yes.
this should be this. You should do this. I should do this. I shouldn't do this. You shouldn't
Yes.
do this. Right. Because isn't that a judgment,
Yeah.
an opinion?
Yes. Absolutely. A way of clinging to
Yeah.
what you think it is, at least. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not that the opinions in and of themselves or
No.
are themselves are leaking the energy. Having your opinions and your beliefs are not the energy leak. It's
Mm-mm.
the clinging to them, the need to
Yep.
be right. It can lead into these judgments and this strong, powerful need to be right about, to where
Because it's
you're not
resistance.
able, exactly,
Right.
and you're not able to hold them open-handedly and allow others to have their own feelings and beliefs and opinions about things, and just a natural exchange of inquiry, and maybe seeing a thing through the perspective of the other, you know?
100%.
I love that what you said. This idea of when I'm unyielding or I'm hard in my attitude and in my opinions about a thing.
Mhm.
That's where we leak the energy.
Totally. Totally. And because, we all have preferences, right? I like
Right.
this. I don't like this. But when they take so having a preference of something you like or dislike is one thing. Again, that's not the problem. That's not even having the opinion, I think this is way it ought to be or not. But as soon as you start to like embrace, like identify with it, then you have basically it's another way of saying this shouldn't be this way.
Yeah.
That's an opinion, right? This idea of being opinionated. We all know people that are like, well, that's stupid. That shouldn't be that way. Well, that's
Right.
dumb. Why are you doing it that? And it's like, okay. So it doesn't change. Even if you have, like, I could be driving on the road, right? And people are driving erratically. They shouldn't be driving this way. What actually
Right.
changes? Nothing,
Mm-mm.
except for I've now expended some energy.
Yes. You're
It,
ruminating on that. You're clinging to judgments about it, how it ought to be, postulating possibly.
totally.
And then you're just off like a shot, and with the
Yep.
energy leaking out. It's
And
yeah.
nothing's changed.
Yeah.
That they're still driving erratically. They're still whatever a person is still behaving this way. So
Yeah.
if
The
I
only
have an
thing affected
opinion,
by your judgment was you.
it's me. I
Yeah.
just resisted it. I felt frustrated. Nothing actually changed. But what if I think it's this idea of learning to say, what if I don't take that as serious? What if there is nothing I should do or shouldn't do in life?
Right.
That's a
Right.
crazy thing, right? That almost feels
Exactly.
scary. Like, what do you mean there's nothing I should or shouldn't do? Yeah, I don't. Then what's your motivation for living?
Free. That feels freeing to me.
Yeah. Then you get to
Very
you
free.
get to you get to be and you get to
Yeah.
respond to life. But this idea, yeah, I have an idea of the way things ought to be or should be. This is a
Mm,
massive, massive drain of life force energy.
absolutely. Well, I thought the interesting thing about the first one is these ideas of, I wanted to read getting lost in fantasy, mental images, illusion, and reverie. And
Mm.
I had to think through, well, what does it mean by reverie?
Mm.
And it kind of broke it down. I thought it had a really good definition. I'm trying to refer back to so, like being lost in thoughts of possible futures, a
Hmm.
remembered past, inhabiting mental worlds and imagined realities is a significant way to leak energy, both personally and at the collective level.
Interesting. Say more about getting lost in possible futures. Can you say more about that? Getting lost in possible futures.
I mean, just well, like for example, with us, what we're trying to create right now, we've got several things kind of going on. We have this home that's attached to our home here in Santa Maria by one wall, and we're in the processes of purchasing it. But you run into challenges with everything in life, and those challenges, hopefully, depending on how you are receiving them, how you're allowing them to come in and be what they are, can help grow you and expand you. if you're not clinging too much that it has to be a certain way. So in our creation of this thing, we've run into some challenges in the purchase with the people that we're buying the home from. For example, they live in Canada. They're going to be here for a very short window of time in the time that we're here. There's some issues kind of with that, with the transfers of monies and how all that goes. It's a huge remodel, huge. I mean, honestly, it might be simpler if we could just level it. That's how much of a reconstruction, because they had built some things that were not legal. So this idea of just holding it open-handedly enough where I'm not clinging to the thing and not fantasizing in a future orientation of what it's going to be, just allowing it to be where it's at, facing the challenges in the present moment, and not really overtly investing this future. And we want to manifest a beautiful reality where our family is going to be expanding and growing. We're looking forward to grandbabies. We would love to have our adult children with their partners and here all together. Right now, it's just a 2-bedroom place. So we have that going on. We have another piece of property we're trying to purchase in Hawaii where our daughter and her husband live. And there's a theme. We're running into kind of some similar challenges. Both the people here that we're purchasing from and the man that we're purchasing from in Hawaii are not as eager as we feel to make it happen. They're very busy. They're much slower. They have their own lives and challenges. So when you are in something like this, you have to just hold it. You have your dreams and your hopes for the future, but you don't cling so tightly to them that it robs you of the lessons that you can be learning in the challenges you're facing as you go along in the journey and the process,
Yes, I totally can relate with you in what you're sharing there. I was having a conversation with somebody not too long ago, and we were talking about the reality of dreams, right? Like when you're dreaming at night, right? It's interesting that when you're dreaming at night, you have no idea that you're dreaming. You think it's real. 99.9%. There is that small percentage of times where you're lucid dreaming, where you're aware that it's a dream, but that's not the norm. Most of the time when you're dreaming, you actually get caught up in the drama of the dream. However it feels, whatever's going on,
fully
whatever the
identified with it.
conversations,
Yeah.
fully identified. You think it's real until that moment of awakening happens and you start to wake up from the dream. And then you realize, oh, that wasn't real. It's just a dream. And what I have discovered, especially as a coach and my coaching work, I've discovered is that people want to create their life. They want to create their future. But I always tell people the only way you can really create your future is if you wake up from the dream first.
Yeah.
Because if you don't wake up from the dream, then what I have discovered is that people want to escape the dream because it's a bad dream or it doesn't feel pleasant. So that's what really kind of gets us like, oh, I want to wake up out of the, nobody even sees it as a dream. They think it's real. So what happens is when you're suffering, you're in a dramatic pain. This shouldn't be this way. Or so then what we do is the mind goes to the future and it says, well, look how cool it would be if you got this job or if you moved to this place.
Yes.
And then that's called escape.
Exactly.
That's not creating the future. That's escaping my present moment that I don't like because I'm having a bad dream.
Right. Exactly. So that idea of Vikalpa, which is this yogic term that is used for fantasy and illusion and reverie. So it's where you're imagining possible future scenarios, which you might be happier. That's fantasy. Or you're imagining possible future scenarios in which you're going to suffer. That creates anxiety. Or you're remembering past good times by wearing rose-colored glasses and wishing that things could be like that again. That's what reverie means. And then what about this one? Remembering past mistakes and then thinking about what you coulda, shoulda, would have done. that leads to only regret and guilt, which robs you of the present moment.
Yes,
Those four are, in the yogic view, simply the most common forms of insanity
absolutely.
because they rob us of our life force energy.
Yeah. Yeah. And they keep us trapped in the karmic. When I say karma,
Yes.
the karmic cycles are just, it's just past, right? All karma is it's action and reaction that's has a past reference point.
Right. Exactly.
So I'm reacting to the past. I'm trying to escape the past by reacting to the past. So then,
Mhm.
whenever we visualize a future,
Right.
I always tell people there's no future. It never
Right.
exists. It never will exist. So when we imagine a future, you are literally regurgitating a past reference point
Yeah.
because that's where it's drawing from. You can't draw from the future. So you're drawing from
Exactly.
the past.
And even just this idea of when you're doing that, these things, and we all do it.
Mhm.
I confess, I mean, my goodness, it can be really a way of numbing, of distracting
Yeah.
the self in non-essential
Yep.
types of things,
Yep.
which really is almost in when you look up the word indifference, indifference is really immersing yourself in things
Mm.
that are non-essential.
Mhm.
And we all, especially in this age and day, um is that is
Yeah.
that type of, just where we're numbing our existential angst or simply distracting ourselves from what we ourselves or others are feeling. And it can be like doing a crossword puzzle or playing a challenging video game or reading all the news of the day, scrolling through the news of the day. Um, those things can be just as much things that keep us in our
Yes.
head and out
Yes.
of the present moment, thus leaking our energy all over the place.
100%. 100%. So good. And it is, and especially with technology, it's become a little more challenging to pay attention to the moment, right? The nature of this moment, like the quality of this moment, the feeling of it's like because we're having a bad dream, right? It's because I always tell people, like, if there's drama, if you're experiencing drama or a sense of obstacles, right? It feels like something's happening here. It's not good. That's a dream.
Yeah.
I'm in a dream state because that's what, when you're in the dream, it feels, it's like going watching a movie. And what if you didn't realize, if you lost consciousness that you were in a movie and you got sucked into the picture
Right.
that's in front of you, you would actually think that's real,
Mm.
but it's not real. It's a
Mm-mm.
movie, it's a drama. And in the
I
same
know.
way, I always tell people there's no problems in life. Drama doesn't come from life. Drama comes
Mm-mm.
from the dream state. You're
Yeah.
dreaming. So we're perceiving a potential problem. So, like, I may feel, it's interesting, we could be in a situation, we say, I'm being prevented from moving forward in my life.
Mm.
But in this moment, you're not being prevented from experiencing life in this moment.
Mm-mm.
There's nothing happening in this moment. It's like,
Right.
oh, when I say nothing, I mean, there's nothing holding you back from experiencing this moment
This
the way it
moment.
is.
Right. Yep.
And which is, by the way, where your life is. That's
Yeah.
the only life you have.
Right. Is the now.
It's right
Yep.
now. So the obstacles or the drama or this battle, this war, whatever it is that we're fighting, it can't be found in this moment.
Mm-mm.
It's in the future. And where's the future? In my mind. It's not in
Yeah.
reality.
Mm-mm.
So I'm in a dream state,
And
literally in the
neither is the
future.
past.
Right? And there's no past. The past was never even the past. I always tell people, like, when did the past actually happen? They go, well, it happened in the past. No, it happened in the moment.
Well, and this is interesting too. So it says humans are simply terrible at accurately predicting how they will feel in any given future situation, even when they're convinced otherwise. And there's a researcher named Dan Gilbert has proven this. I wanted to delve into his work, but they're also terrible at remembering the past with any accuracy. What you think are accurate memories are largely expressions of your own individual psychology, much like dreams, like we're talking about, woven from elements of the past experiences.
It is
Isn't that
so funny.
interesting?
It's so spot on. How many people I know, and I used to do this myself. When you think about your past, I mean, how many people I have a friend that loves to reminisce about the good old days. And it's always about, I remember that time in my life when this happened. And
Yeah.
these were the days, man. I wish I could go back there. We had such fun. It was so great. It was this, but in reality, like, you spend enough time with that person and you get enough history with that person, you realize, look, I remember those days with you.
Right.
And when I was with you in those days, you were actually doing the
Y-
same thing.
Yeah.
You were
Yeah.
remembering the previous days.
Yes.
And
And
it's
what
like,
a thief and robber. It's such a
right,
thief and a robber that you're
like,
participating and cooperating with while your
yeah,
energy is leaking out all over the place.
totally. It's like, oh, I want to go back to those good old days when it was so amazing. But I was with you in those good old days,
Yeah.
and and
You were doing the
you were like
same
reminiscing
thing.
about the past that you weren't. So
Yeah.
it's like, at what point do you actually enjoy your life,
Right. Yeah.
the life that you have,
And then
right?
this idea of indifference, when we're doing that, when we're
Mm-hmm.
in those places, it makes us indifferent to the now moment. We're just
Yeah.
indifferent from sweet, simple abiding in our natural states. Indifference arises because we, each one of us, and the mass consciousness does not see its own true nature. We
No.
just don't see it. And I delved into this idea of indifference a bit, Jamal, today, because I wanted to kind of explore um, a little bit more about indifference. Is it okay if I do that?
Oh, please, please, please do.
Okay. Um, so indifference is an energy field. So it's all about energy.
Mm-hmm.
It's an energy field that gets you to focus your precious time and life force on inessential things. The inessential in this context is anything that takes your attention away from the present moment.
Mm.
Anything that takes your attention away from the present moment and its limitless potential. As long as you are focused on the inessential, you will be indifferent to the things in life that really matter, that are happening right
Indifference.
now. So, rooted
Yes.
in this idea of reverie, fantasy, postulations over the future of what it might be,
Mm.
ruminations on the past, suffering that we had, and all that, is, I think, this subtlety of indifference that keeps
Yes.
us numb to our true nature, the truest essence of all that we are.
Indifference to the glory. Like, we're here having this conversation. Like, could there be anything more?
Better. The Holocaust survivor and writer Elie Wiesel had
Mm.
this to say about indifference. The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. The
Indifference.
opposite of art is not ugliness, it's indifference. The opposite of faith is not heresy, it's indifference. And the opposite of life is not death, it's indifference.
Mm.
Isn't that profound?
It is profound. It totally is. No, I love that.
And
I love that.
there's subtleties even in this idea of indifference. On one part of it, you can become when indifference is really repressed,
Mhm.
like it's a repressed form, like you're not even really aware that you're indifferent, which I think a lot of us can fall in humanity into that category. When it's repressed, it manifests as gullibility.
Mm.
So people then become victims of mass propaganda of the collective. An example here would be like governments,
Mm.
you know, like you're watching, you think, well, the governments aren't helping anything in this world situation, are they? So how could I? This gullibility essentially allows people to hide their indifference behind the indifference of other people.
Mm.
So at the deepest level, gullibility, which is a component of this indifference, will foster individual weakness and feelings of powerlessness in a person. And so they just can become prone and gullible to mass conditioning at a massive level. Another form of it, which can be somewhat more reactive, is this idea of hiding fear in obsessions with structure, obsessions with systems, and obsessions with techniques and data gathering. We can become deeply identified with the structures in our minds, even. And then we forget about the reason for the structures in the first place. This can give rise to deep self-delusion, in which we then can build powerful mental walls around ourselves, keeping the world and others locked out. And so in some sense, it is also gullible, like the repressive nature, but the gullibility concerns our own propaganda. We're believing our own press in our minds. So it just keeps us indifferent and numb to what we actually, it keeps us powerless, believing that we're powerless.
Yes. Yes.
You know,
Versus it's interesting. I think when we buy into this narrative, like when we're not paying attention to what's in front of us, which, when you're this idea of indifference, right? It's this, I'm focused on something else, right? Some
yes,
other,
something separate outside of me.
right. Then I can't do what's necessary or what's needed. And it's really interesting. I was, my wife Tay was telling me about a great podcast that she listened to, and she was telling me, she said, I really want you to listen to this. And it was, you're familiar with RFK Jr., right? Who's running for president.
Yes, I've been following some of his story.
Yeah, and he's interesting, and he was on the Joe Rogan podcast.
Yeah.
And probably the only place that you can have a wide-ranging discussion the way he was able to do it without, censorship or anything like that. So he was having this, and I knew as soon as she said, I have this podcast I want you to listen to, I listened to it. It was really impactful to listen. He's really sharing some really insightful things. I felt such resistance in my spirit come up and go, I don't want to listen to this. I don't want to listen to him. I don't want to listen to him on the Joe Rogan because I already know what he's going to say. And I so resonate with what he's going to say already. I don't even know what he's going to say, but I already resonate with it. I know that sounds strange because
no,
I just
it
know
doesn't, because I
heart.
listened to his podcast with Aubrey Marcus, and it was long as well, and I had the same resistance. So I can totally resonate with what you're saying. Go ahead.
So last night, she's playing this so I didn't listen to it, and she just starts playing it in the house. So I'm listening and I'm listening to it, and I'm feeling this resistance rise up in me, and I'm agitated.
Interesting.
And she's like, I think kind of observing that, and she's like, well, what's the, like, what are you feeling? And I just said, I 100% agree with everything he's saying. And she's like, well, what's the problem then? I said, it doesn't matter. I just kept saying, it doesn't matter what he's saying. He's telling what I know to be, just through clarity and observation, the truth about a lot of our medical systems that are killing and poisoning people, and people are doing it willingly because they think it's the right thing to do. And he's saying, listen, I'm just showing you the evidence, the data, the science. I'm waiting for someone to refute me. Nobody will refute him. No one will debate him on this. He's like, he said, their children, he starts talking about autism. He starts talking about a lot of different things, and he's linking the dots. And it's like, I know this, I've known this for years. Like, he's not
a body of work
he's
investigated for many, many years before ever thinking of running for president, by the way.
100%. And I've known this. Like, honestly, I'm not trying to toot my own horn. Like, I've been down this road. I have been passionate about these issues. I see everything he's seen. But Joe Rogan asked him this question. He said, like, why are you doing this? Like, what did you, like, why are you so, like, because this is not actually, like, you've been censored and banned, and a lot of folks won't listen to you because of some of these things. He said, why would you choose to like run for president, or why do you choose to be passionate about these topics? And he goes, I didn't. He said, I never chose to get into this. He said, it happened. He said,
Mm,
I care about people. I listen to their stories,
mm,
and in hearing the stories and,
yeah.
responding to people's stories, it
Yeah.
led down this road where I'm
Yes.
discovering, the trauma, the
Mm,
suffering that people are going through. And then I want to be a solution, and I want to provide
right.
insight and clarity for folks. And he's like, so it happened.
I
And it
love that.
was clicking with me. It's like, oh, there's no agenda. He just responded to what was happening. And here he is now running for president,
Right.
has these positions. He's
Right.
actually polling higher, which people won't tell you. He's actually polling higher than our current president,
Yeah.
and in favorability ratings,
Yeah.
and in our former president, Trump. And you won't hear that on the news. But the
Mm-mm.
reason the reason this is all happening for him is because he's just responding to life. And I was tempted to not, like, in that conversation there, I didn't want to hear it, because I was buying into this narrative of powerlessness. It doesn't matter.
It's indifference. Yeah.
It's
Me
indifference.
too.
That's indifference. It
I am
doesn't
too.
matter.
I've done the
He's
same.
telling the truth. He's like, here's Joe Rogan. He's on there. He's
But
talking
what is
about,
that gonna it won't
but
matter.
you know what? People don't listen. They're
No.
going to just do what the
Do what they
mainstream media
do.
tells them to do. They're just going to
Absolutely.
be like, going to follow the crowd, do just whatever
Mm,
everybody else is doing. And it doesn't matter. And that sensation of indifference, I could feel it in me going,
yes.
okay, so why is, and he said it, there's no suffering. He's like, isn't it hard for you? Aren't you tired? He's like, no,
Mm.
no. And he just talked about, he kind of had some analogies, but he just said, I'm just showing up
Day by day, moment by moment.
day by day,
Yeah.
moment by moment, speaking. He's like, look, if people are ready for this message, they'll receive it. And if they're not, they won't. But for me, I'm just living my life. And it just spoke very deeply to me to say, don't resist this feeling of, it doesn't matter what I say, it doesn't matter what I do.
Mm.
It's not going to make a difference.
And also it does reveal in him, just even the way you're expressing it, this ability to not cling, to just let it be what it
Mm,
is. People will receive what they're going to
mhm,
receive. So there is,
totally.
he has an observational detached sense, it feels like to me, about it. He's not, doesn't feel like he's
Yep.
clinging. He's
No.
just simply showing up moment by moment,
Yep.
day by day, doing what
Yep.
he's been doing. He has been doing this work for many, many, many years
Yep.
in the world.
And And I think I've just tried to have these conversations and then felt powerless. And for
Yeah.
me, it's like the ego then comes and says, we don't want to feel powerless. Just ignore the conversation.
Yep.
Let's not go there. Let's not have it.
Yep.
Turn off the podcast. Don't listen, because you don't want to
Wow.
feel the powerlessness.
Yeah. That's so vulnerable. And I love that you were able to attach what I was just sharing about the indifference, because I would say that that is probably been the same in me. I didn't listen to Rogan's conversation with him, but I listened to maybe a third of Aubrey's, and
Mhm.
I struggled. I just was, it just, I can't handle this. It just,
Yeah. It's
I
like,
don't want to let this matter. I don't want to let it in.
yeah, because if it matters, then what?
Then what's going to happen? Right.
And that's the fear. But it's like, well, then I'll just be aware, right?
Be
Like
aware
it
of just
matters.
that within
Just be
me.
aware. Yeah.
Absolutely.
100%. Yeah. To be indifferent means I'm trying to protect myself from this moment,
Yeah.
from
And how
feeling what I'm
much,
feeling. Right.
and I would go so far to say, with this shadow at
Hmm.
the frequency, the indifference is a shadow. The world at large is right now alchemizing this. We have
Mhm.
got to alchemize it to come out of
Okay.
it.
Can you give some definition to alchemize? What does that mean?
Well, alchemy, the study and the science of alchemy, is this idea of taking a base metal and transmuting it into gold, or a very
Mm.
valuable metal.
Yep.
And each of us need to be doing that work psychologically, at the level of our spirit, our soul, all of that. So this, we just identified it in you and me, the shadow of indifference. You know, I mean, where it's just, I don't know that I would say lazy. It's a form of self-protection, I think, in some ways, but it
Yeah.
keeps us in an energy like a victim energy. It keeps
Yeah.
us from really fully entering in, shining the light, moving us into higher degrees and ways of being. So it, we each have it in our lives individually, but on the collective level, we have incurred this. We were trapped in it to some degree. So the work of alchemy is to really, it's an inward movement. It's, you know, when you're in the car, instead of raging at the person on the road in front of you that's pissing you off, whatever, take the time to go inward. You know, if that happens and you're triggered by that, alchemy, the work of alchemy would be to begin to have some self-inquiry. What is it about this that's
Yeah.
triggering me, that's causing me to feel
Yep.
anger,
Yep.
frustration, rage, whatever, however, you
Yep.
know, that's the work of alchemy.
Oh, so good. So good. You know, I was just having a conversation with the lady I'm working with, and she just got back from a conference. Um, it was a speakers conference for communication, to be a good communicator.
Mm,
And it was a women's conference, and you know, she was saying that it was like a 5-day thing, and it's just like it was amazing. But one of her takeaways was nobody's listening, even there. No one's listening. Everyone was had to give a speech and a
yeah,
talk at this conference, like a 3-minute
yeah,
talk, and they were supposed to come prepared with the talk like ahead of time, and so they could come
yeah,
and give their. And she didn't know that, she overlooked that instruction, so she didn't have a talk prepared, and she's there, and but everyone's kind of sharing their story and talking, and she said it was very evident that nobody was listening to each other.
oh,
People were sharing very vulnerable things, people talking about suicide that had affected their family, loss of spouses, it was, you know, it was kind of an older population of folks, and nobody was listening because it was difficult. It was challenging. This was a Christian conference. And so it was like, we don't go there. We don't talk about certain things. We don't think so. Nobody was listening. And she was so agitated by that.
mm,
And
mm,
so she was in a conversation with somebody, and she said, I need to listen to this lady because she just shared something incredibly vulnerable, and nobody even heard her
heard
as she's
her
speaking. That they didn't even follow up with nothing. So she's like, I need to see. She's
to
like, I
do
see
that,
her and I want to hear. So she pulled the lady aside, was having a
began to
conversation with
inquire.
her. Tell me what happened. Tell me what's going on. And she just listened. And she said, I just lost myself in the conversation. I just listened.
Mm,
I was present. And then the lady said, do you know what you're so after she's listening to this lady
yeah,
share her most powerful, vulnerable, unbelievable story that nobody had even could even hear or even inquire about, they just zoomed over it, she just lost herself in the conversation. And finally the lady was like, oh honey, do you know what you're going to speak about? What's your speech going to be about? She's like, I have no idea. She's like, I haven't prepared for it. She's like, oh, I'm so nervous for you. She's like, no, it's okay, I'll know when it's time.
oh,
um so then the time comes for her to speak, and then it clicked for her. She was like, to be a good communicator, you have to listen
absolutely.
and you have to let yourself be moved, because this lady,
Yes,
and so several times people were sharing deep stuff and the feedback, because this was a conference on communication, and it was all about feedback. Oh, you need to add humor, you need to add some levity because people
yeah,
aren't going to.
image
So
yourself a
somebody
certain
shared
way,
something deeply
deep,
personal in her speech,
yeah,
and
and
the response was,
painful.
you need to tell a joke, that's too heavy.
Wow.
So she was so in her speech, she gave the speech, and she said, I don't know how to say this, but I want to tell everybody there that they suck at communication because they don't listen.
Mm,
And so so she was getting feedback, and she was like, well, what, maybe there's a story I could tell to illustrate it. And the story that she ended up telling was this parable, this kind of this, it's a known saying, I guess. I'd never heard of it, but she said it's like the story of, like, there was a man who was on a beach, and he saw all these starfish that got washed up on the shore by the ocean.
Mm.
And there's all these starfish, and starfish, when they get washed up, they'll die if they're not in the water.
Yeah.
So this one guy, there was thousands of starfish, on this beach, and this one guy said, "Gonna throw them all back in the water." So he starts picking them up and he's throwing it in the water, takes another one, throws it back in the water, takes another one.
Wow.
And someone came up and said, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I'm saving these starfish." He's like, "You think you can save all these starfish? Look at this. There's thousands. You think you can?" He's like,
One at a
"Well,
time
I don't
again.
know." He's like, "That one starfish, I saved that one and that one."
Exactly.
And it's like this idea.
Absolutely.
And so she told that story and she said, "So who do you represent? Who are you in this story?" Like, we all put ourselves as the guy throwing the thing in.
The fifth.
He said, "But," she said, "what if you're actually the starfish?
Mm.
Do you identify with the starfish?" It's like, what does it mean to be moved? To allow yourself to be moved, like
Wow.
to salvation, to healing. How do
Mm.
you get moved? You have to be. You
Mm.
have to allow yourself to be picked up and moved
Mm.
back where you need to be, which is,
Which
where do
is
we
the
need to
action of
be?
compassion in the world. So the fact that she was so compassionate and took the time to inquire, to sit, to
Yeah.
listen, to just be
And that was
present,
her.
hold space.
She was like, that was her message. If you don't allow yourself to
Yeah.
be with this moment, hear what people are saying and sharing, you won't get moved to your
Mm.
salvation,
No.
to
Ever.
what you need in this sense. And it's like, but a powerful, like, and that's what I was
Powerful.
resisting, even listening. Like, I want to, okay, so RFK Jr. is talking about, and you know what he's talking about? He's talking about children. He's talking about health. He's talking about what's going on in the world and what we're doing, and that most of our ill health in this country is caused at the hands of the people who are supposed to be helping us. And
Yeah.
we are subjecting ourselves to this. It doesn't have to be this way. It's not a
Mm-mm.
complicated process. If we just will listen and get clear and start to ask questions and dig a little
Right.
deeper, we don't have to suffer. Our children don't have to suffer. This doesn't have to be this way. And it was like, oh, can I let myself be moved by the need for, by even this man's desire, his
Right.
passion for telling the truth? Can I let myself be moved? It's like, what do I do with that move? I'll lose myself in the move. Like, no, you won't.
Yeah.
That's the fear. That's the fear. No, just
Absolutely.
pay attention to it. Just be with it. Feel it.
And even
Feel.
just aware of my fear of feeling that degree of compassion, that degree, that just being aware of that, but allowing the light to see, wow, what's having inquiry into the self is the work of alchemy. Why do I feel fear? Why am I fearing? Allowing myself being swept into the emotion and the compassion of this man's given a lot of his life. I mean, you go back to his original history, it started with like one woman whose child,
Yeah. That he shared that story.
his story's profound.
Yeah. And that's how he
and
got
just
into this.
one person after another and after another.
Yep.
And then he just ends up, holding this, and then, moving it into action as he's holding space, listening, inquiring, entering into the raw emotion of children loss, of extreme adverse events in children's brains chemistry, their body chemistry is being changed indefinitely for the remainder of their life. Parents whose lives will be changed indefinitely because now they have this child who will more than likely be living with them for a lifetime,
100%.
So
Yep. Totally.
yeah.
Totally.
Thank you for helping me see that, because I didn't take the time. I just thought, what is this? I think it's also just the indifference to the whole processes of election, of all the cycles of it, the craziness of it all, the indifference that I've developed to it all, to my own ability to have a voice and have impact in it all.
Yeah. Well, your ability, I think when we allow ourselves to be moved by life, not by escaping life through this sense of like bypassing, like in the future, I'm going to create this magical future.
Yeah. And bypassing
where I can escape to.
Right.
And it's like, well, that's how we avoid life. That's how we drain ourselves of life energy.
How we numb. Mm.
or judge, like this shouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
Like, one of the things that I was really listening for in RFK as he's talking was like, I didn't hear a lot of this shouldn't be happening, even though I'm sure he feels strongly that shouldn't be happening as I do. But I mean, it's not, it shouldn't, if see, that's where my resistance comes from.
Yeah.
I think that's where my hesitation is. I don't want to hear this because I get sometimes can get really very worked up a little bit and say, why is this man is speaking important, he's talking about important topics, even if you don't agree with him, it's fine, but he's actually talking about substantive material. He's not speaking in sound bites. He's not playing a victim. He's not,
Yeah.
advocating that we bomb countries and perpetual war. He's not doing any of that. He's having conversations about real issues. And so my thing is like, I become so resistive because it's like, this should be the conversation that we're seeing on every news channel.
Yeah.
This should be a conversation. Why
Yeah.
is this guy getting censored and banned? This should be. And so when
Yeah.
that word shoulda,
woulda, coulda.
the
Yeah.
should, now it's resistive in nature. And I realized
Yeah.
like, drop the should. This is the conversation we are having.
Yeah.
So he's having the conversation. He's
Yeah.
not.
And it keeps us from the here and now. We're having it
Yep.
now.
We're having it now. So let's have that conversation now. It's not about we should be having this more. More people should be hosting this conversation. How is it that he's only on Joe Rogan, even though that's one of the biggest podcasts, which I'm
Yeah.
glad he's on it.
By
But
millions.
it's like, but how is he not on CNN or Fox
Yeah.
or MSNBC or NBC? Like whatever. It's like,
Yeah.
forget that.
And
There's
then
no
you're off leaking energy with all that.
I'm off leaking energy. It's like, no,
Totally.
forget that.
I'm
People
very
can censor,
guilty of it
fine, no
too.
problem. It's
Yeah.
like, let people censor, let people do whatever they're going to do. I'm
Right.
having this conversation
Yep.
because it
I'm
matters.
showing
It's
up. I love it. I love that.
I'm showing up. I'm
Yep.
gonna be here. And now there's no leakage. It's
Yeah.
just the conversation I'm having.
Yeah.
It's just what I'm doing. But it's like that, take it out of, I'm just using that as an example, but anything that we're trying to avoid, are we trying to avoid this moment? So how will I avoid this moment? Future, let's create a utopian future I can escape to.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I'm religious, I'll call it heaven.
Fantasy,
if I'm not,
right. Exactly.
I'll call it next year or whatever, or 6 months. But it's like, what's wrong with this?
And how many times in our tradition, our religious tradition that we steeped in for a good portion of our lives have we heard that? I'm just waiting. I'm waiting for getting out of here.
Yeah. This world's not our home. Can't wait to go die and go to heaven. It's like, what a waste of life.
Yes. So sad. And from the I am presence that resides here now in us. The presence that changes everything. It's presence that changes everything.
Yeah. 100%. There's no substitute for presence, right?
There isn't.
But I can be present if there's nothing this should or shouldn't be happening. Forget that. It's happening. This is happening, and it's fine. And I can
be very present when I'm not stuck in my ideas and my concepts, my perspective. We played I don't know if you've ever played the game bocce ball. Have you ever played that? We played it on the beach the other day. And it's just a little white, it looks like a small little white ball, but it's not dense or heavy per se, like a golf ball. But it's lesser in its heaviness. And you throw it, and then there's 4 blues, let's say heavy balls, and 4 red balls, and you split up in teams. And you throw the white ball, and the goal is to get your heavy, let's say I'm on team red, my heavy red ball to hit or touch the white little ball that I threw. And you can throw the thing short distances, medium distances, long distances, and depending on who you're playing with and how good they are. But it's interesting, when we were playing the other day, I observed on the beach, you have a very limited perspective of any of the colors of balls, either on the other teams or your team. From your perspective, it might look like your red ball, if I'm team red, is like almost touching or on top of the white ball. But then as you move closer, it's the blue ball will be much closer. So if you've got this fixed idea of where it's at, I became very present to how, I had a perspective. but it was extremely limited about the
Mm,
truth and the reality of who really was closest to the white ball,
yeah.
who was
Yeah.
touching it. So
Yeah.
when we can just hold things open-handedly, like even playing the game and not like get too competitive, just
Yeah.
let it be what it is in the present moment. The wind was blowing. It was a beautiful, clear day. I'm there with my family members. We're playing, we're laughing, you know,
Mm,
it was beautiful. But
mm,
there were moments where
mm,
I felt the limitation of my perspective. Was very
mm,
much confronted just in that silly game by how limited my perspective was.
mhm, mhm.
And just when we would near, when all the balls, all four red, all four blue, were near, it was like, wow, balls that you thought were the closest were actually not. Other
Yeah.
balls you didn't think were as close because I
Yeah.
was off on some other portion of the beach from my little limited perspective.
Mhm,
You know,
100%. 100%. Yeah, it's really good.
so the
It's really
clinging
good.
is if we can just hold things open
Well, because,
handedly.
and I think what you're saying is so important because when you can recognize, just like in that example you use of the bocce ball game, when you recognize my perspective is skewed.
Very skewed.
So it's like, so, so if you form a judgment or an opinion based upon your limited perspective, that's resistance and you're going to leak energy. So it's almost like saying, hey, look, I have a perspective here. It's okay to have a perspective. It's okay to have an opinion. Just
And
hold it
that's not going to leak
loosely.
the energy having it. But if
Nope.
you're
Nope.
clinging,
Yeah. So that's why you just hold it loosely, go, okay, I have this perspective,
yes,
but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. What matters is
right.
I'm just looking at a situation from my perspective, but I can also see that there's other perspectives, right? Because the moment you
Yes.
saw that the blue ball is closer, not the red ball, even though the red ball initially appeared
Yeah,
closer, then you can realize I have a little more clarity now.
exactly.
Because if you weren't sold on this, the red ball is closer to the white, it's like it's
Yes,
closest. And if you had that agenda, then you won't see that actually there's another ball that's closer because you're
right.
not open, because it would violate your
Yes.
preconceived idea. That's why I say,
Yeah,
be open, hold your perspective very loosely. Then you'll see with some clarity.
right.
Then we won't have to censor people because they
And
say things
allow
that
for the
violate our
motion and the movement.
right.
Exactly. Allowing for the motion and the movement of as I moved closer. I mean, just
Yeah.
by inches, steps. I was like, I started to like, in certain circumstances, my heart was like, oh, it's not that as close as I thought it was. And then, like, there were other times I was surprised, like, oh, it's closer than, you know what I'm saying? So just
Mhm.
be open to life and moving to a different perspective, another part of the beach, moving closer to the thing that you're interested in.
Yeah.
Take the
Yeah.
steps in the movement forward.
Yeah.
It's all energy and motion anyway.
Yeah. Beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So
So good.
so
Aly, this is
good.
so good. This is important.
It
And I'm
is
sure
very
there's a lot more
important.
we could say about this, but this is,
I
I
love
think,
it.
good for people to just consider. And, I know there's, if you're listening to this and, I guess the encouragement would be, hey, it's great that you're opinionated. Just don't take it seriously.
Exactly.
And hold it loosely and say, okay, I have a perspective, but it's not the end of the world. It's not the end all be all. Let's just hold it loosely and watch. Sometimes I even like to tell people to do this, to say, just take an hour out of your day and have no opinions.
Mm.
When you drive, don't judge if someone's driving correctly or incorrectly. When your partner or spouse walks in the room, don't evaluate them as to what they're doing right or wrong. When somebody's with you, don't even, just observe them the way they are and just try it for an hour.
Mm.
Everybody that you see, everything that's
Such
happening
good.
is
Yeah.
exactly the way it needs to be in this
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
And what you will experience is a loving sensation. Because that's what
Yes.
love is, by the way. Right? When you fall in love with
Absolutely.
somebody, you suspend all judgment.
It's so true.
We call that
So true.
love. We then say, "Oh, I'm in love." If you want to live in love, suspend judgment.
Mm.
Just suspend it. Just say, "Okay, it's okay. There's nothing. This moment is the way it is. Even if I don't like it,
Exactly.
it's the way it is. So I'm not going to." You will notice a loving sensation to start to come over you. This
Yeah.
peaceful
And a
sensation.
quiet stillness.
Quiet.
Hmm.
Yep. 100%. And And even that, then you won't need to escape a future. You won't need to daydream about some future that you can
Yes.
then, it's going to be great next month or next year when this, it's like, you
Right.
won't need to escape because this moment, what's the problem? I'm not
Right.
resisting it. It's
Or
fine.
remember when it was great back
I'll
then,
remember
back in the day.
100%. It's like, yeah, we don't have to play that game, right? Because this
Uh-uh.
is the only life I have in is right now. And it will never be different. It's always going to be
Yes,
now.
absolutely. And now.
Yeah.
Richard Rohr said this. He said, if we can allow our thoughts and feelings to pass through us, neither clinging to them nor opposing them, that resistance, and without ever expecting perfect success, I promise we will come to a deeper, wider, and wiser, expansive place.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth?
I love it.
Yeah.
Love it, love it, love it. Pass
So
through us.
good.
Let them pass rather than clinging or
Yeah.
opposing them. That's the place of acceptance, isn't it?
That's it, isn't it?
And that is that's the work of alchemy right there.
Transmuting, right? We're transmuting. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We're
Just
taking this moment that
acceptance.
was bad to
Yep.
bliss.
Yep. Just acceptance of what is, non-resistance. Just
Yeah.
accept the moment as it is. What can I learn? Self-inquiry.
It's like turning coal into gold, lead into gold.
Absolutely.
So this
Yep.
moment I perceived it as bad. It's coal. Now it's gold.
Yep. Just try
'Cause-
wrapping your arms around yourself and I accept it. I'm
yeah.
accepting, even though I feel like I'm being a stinker. I'm raging right now. I'm angry. I love you, me still, and being with that. That's the work of alchemy and transmutation.
Yeah.
Not opposing, not resisting, loving acceptance. And we
Absolutely.
find ourselves just having more energy
Yeah.
naturally. We didn't necessarily, you know what I'm saying? We
Yeah.
just find we start to feel better. We start to access our energy in the
Yeah.
present moment.
It reminds me of remember when Paul, like in the Bible in the New Testament, when Saul was before his conversion, he had this vision of Jesus when Saul was on the road to Damascus because he was opposed to this new
Yeah.
movement, and so he's trying to arrest all these new followers of the way, and
Yeah.
because it was a threat to his interpretation of Judaism and his religious context, and so he was out to arrest everybody, and Jesus shows up in this vision to him and says, Paul, or Saul, why do you persecute me? And he's like, well, who are you? And he's like, I'm Jesus. I'm the one you're persecuting. He goes, but then he makes a statement. Some translations kind of have it. And I really enjoy it because he's like, it's hard for you to kick against the rocks.
Yes.
And it's like the old King James says, it's hard for you to kick against the pricks. Like basically saying you're kicking
goads.
against like this sharp. It's like, it's really hard for you to try to kick a mountain, to try
Yeah.
to, another way to say it's like, it's hard for
You'll
you to
hurt
step on
yourself.
knives. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
you're the one that's going to get hurt because you
Absolutely.
can't change life through resistance. It's like trying to hold the tide back.
Right.
You could try to hold the tide back if you're in the ocean. The only thing that will happen is you will get tired.
Real
But you're
tired.
not holding the tide back. And it's the same thing with like, what if you don't have to resist this moment? Because life is
Right.
coming through this moment. If you don't have to resist it, because it's hard for you to resist it. Stop living hard.
Right.
That's what I would say. It's like, well, why do you have to live so hard?
Right. My yoke is easy, my burden is light.
Let's live easy and light.
Exactly.
Get more done then.
Absolutely.
It's more productive.
My husband told me a story years ago. I'm trying to remember. It was about two guys and they were chopping wood. And one of them stopped to have his break, his eating break. And as he was lingering, he was slow in eating. He was also sharpening the blade of his axe while he was eating.
Yeah.
And the other man got really irritated, was in complete resistance to the fact that this man was so blasé, eating, sharpening, he's taking a sweet time while the other guy continued to work right through any break. And the one that did that got a heck of a lot more done and was at a lot more peace.
Yeah. Because he sharpened his axe through taking his time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. That's a beautiful example. of
Yeah.
this. Well,
So
Aly, thank you
good.
so much for this conversation, and enjoy where you are in the world. Oh my gosh, living the
Mm.
good life.
We're so blessed. We feel so blessed. You got to come and
Awesome.
visit us with your beautiful bride.
I know we will. We definitely will. That will
Yes,
happen. The
absolutely.
intention's been set. So, um, I think if you're listening to this, hey, just if you've enjoyed the conversation, let us know. We always love to hear from the
Yes,
listeners. I love to hear. It's
feedback.
funny when a few weeks go by. Every time you're on the podcast, Aly, when a few weeks go by, if we, traveling, if the schedule gets off a little bit, I always get comments from people. They say, "Where's that? When's Aly coming back? When's Aly coming back
Oh,
on the show?"
I
So,
love that. That means a lot to
yeah,
me.
your
Thank
voice
you.
is very important, and so thank you for making your voice available. And
Thank
if
you
you've
for
enjoyed the
having me.
podcast, oh,
Yes.
of course, please rate and review. It only takes a minute. I know I say this a lot, but it's one of the things you can do if you've enjoyed the podcast. If you have not yet rated and reviewed the podcast, you can do it on iTunes. Probably the best place is iTunes. But if you listen on Spotify, do it there, do it
Yeah.
wherever. But iTunes, Spotify is probably the two biggest places to rate and review. And it just helps other people discover the show and listen
Yes.
to these conversations. So
Yes.
thank you guys.
Thank you. Thank you so
And
much.
yeah, until next time, guys,
Yes.
take
Until next
care.
time.